Hello everyone. I want to first thank the Rav for...
Speak up.
Oh. I want to first thank the Rav for spending the time and making time to learn with me. So tonight we're going to discuss the halachic aspects of dairy and cheese. And that this shiur is also dedicated for my father, Etzion ben Iran. So now, to start off, the first thing we need to discuss is everyone has milk, and we assume right away that milk is 100% kosher, and there was never an issue to even start drinking milk from a cow. And we need to understand where is the source that permits us to have milk to begin with. Because we have other principles that when it comes to liquids or other things that come from a cow, they're not allowed to have. For example, if we have blood that comes out from the cow, any blood that comes out from it, you're not allowed to have, and the Torah tells us, do not eat the blood. And another aspect we have in the halakha tells you that if you were to take a cut of meat, and you didn't salt it, you didn't do anything, and you want to have it raw, as long as the blood is still inside the meat, you're allowed to eat it. There's no issur of falls upon it. And you could say that similarly, that the milk is only permitted when it's inside the animal. Once it comes out, you're not allowed to have the milk anymore. So they tell us that the Torah says that what is Eretz Yisrael praised about? It says it is a land flowing with milk, honey. And if the Torah is going to tell you, come to this land because it has a lot of milk, but you're not allowed to have this milk, it doesn't make sense that the Torah would tell you such a praise. So therefore we learn out that milk is permitted because Hashem told you that you're coming to a land that it has a lot of milk. Right? So now the other aspect of milk that we need to address is now that we know that milk you're allowed to have, there's a gezerah that the Chachamim put on milk, which is famously what we know as Chalav Yisrael. And the reason why they put it is because famously we know that they might mix milk from a camel, a horse, or whatever other animal that's not kosher. And why is that an issue? So they take it out from this thing. Okay, big deal. So you have some little horse milk, you have a little cow milk, you have a little camel milk. That's because we have a halachic principle that says, Kol sheyotzeh min hatameh, tameh. And that means that anything that comes out from something that is tameh, meaning non-kosher, that thing that came out from it, meaning the camel's milk, the horse milk, are also tameh that you're not allowed to have. So we're concerned that, they're not going to be able to sell it, they have nothing to do with it. And what's the best thing to do? Throw it into some milk, sell it to the market, and you make some profit because you're able to inflate your volume of regular milk. So now, we have to understand, when exactly does the issue of Chalav Yisrael even apply? Does it apply always? Does it apply only in certain cases? Can you sometimes have Chalav Yisrael or not? So the original decree was that when there is no Jew around to watch the goy make the milk, meaning milking it or putting it in the vat, we have this concern that they're going to mix it and therefore you cannot have it. And this applied, the gezerah was, we don't care if there's only cows, we don't care if there's one horse in the city, as long as the goy is milking it, the gezerah applies. And this gezerah, there's a machloket rishonim, exactly how the gezerah was made. Is the gezerah made just because there's a reason why the Chachamim come and tell us we're concerned they're going to mix it, and therefore if our reason is gone one day, you could have the milk? Or is a gezerah that is considered davar shebeminyan, that is made by the Chachamim as a whole, And once they made this decree, we don't care if the reason exists, if it's gone. It's going to remain forever until you have another bedin or group of rabbis that are in greater number and greater chokhmah that will come and tell you, we're going to remove this decree. No. And Maran rules that the whole reason is because we're concerned they're going to mix it. And it is considered a gezerah of davar shebeminyan that the rabbi has decreed as a whole. And it's going to apply forever. Doesn't make a difference what's going on. Now there are certain parameters you could apply to solve this Chalav Yisrael issue. And the most stringent is that you have a Jew watching the whole process, and you make sure that what he's milking is a kosher cow, and that he's not mixed anything else in it. Now this, you could watch it all the time. You could even periodically go in and out of the factory or the farm and just check up and see what he's milking. And with that, it'll be sufficient to call the milk Chalav Yisrael as well. You do not need to watch the whole thing, because if you're going to come in 2 minutes, he's not going to be able to start, quickly mixing, switching from the cow to the horse, and, hide the fact that he's putting non-kosher milk in it. And this also applies, another way to do it, is you could even sit outside the farm or the factory, but you have to do a certain thing, which is you have to go inspect the place to make sure that there are no non-kosher animals, and they does not have already in the vats or in the jugs non-kosher milk. Because if you're going to stand outside and say, I only have cows in my factory, but I'm not going to tell you what I have in my vats, because maybe he put non-kosher milk in there. So you need to inspect the whole farm and the factory to make sure there is no non-kosher animals and no non-kosher milk on the premise. Then you sitting outside the factory is considered that you're guarding and watching over to make sure that he's not going to bring in a non-kosher animal or milk source in order to mix it in. Now, we know famously where Moshe has a tshuva to permit Chalav Yisrael. We have to address how exactly does Rav Moshe come to permit something that is considered davar shebeminyan that you're not allowed to permit, because even if the decree's reason is gone, the gezerah remains. So Rav Moshe had to come with svarot to make it fit that the gezerah is still around, and we're finding ways within the gezerah to make it called Chalav Yisrael. And the way he does it is...
You want to read it?
After, yeah.
After.
After. When I finish it.
Do you have WhatsApp here?
No.
Oh, okay.
No. It's just some bullet points.
What is it?
So, the way Rav Moshe does it, he relies on a few different svarot from different parts of halacha, and we'll first address those in order for us to understand his tshuva. The first part of halacha and the svara he uses is that if you know something is happening, and even if you didn't actually witness it, as long as you know for sure it is happening, we consider it that you saw it. And where is this most famously and done almost every day of the year? And when it comes to weddings, we have, the couple, they do the chuppah, they do the erusin, they give the ring, and then afterwards, whether it's for Ashkenazim that they go to the Cheder Yichud, or by Sfaradim when we do the Cheder Yichud way later, you have witnesses come. And where do the witnesses stand? They, check the room. They make sure there's no one else in there and there's Yichud happening. They leave the room and they stand outside the room for a few minutes, and then they leave. And you're considered fully married. But wait a minute. How do you know what I did in there? Maybe they played cheshvash. Maybe they played solitaire. Who knows what they're doing in there? So we know it is enough time to do biyah. And what do married people do? They have a relation in Yichud. So even though you didn't see it, halachically we consider that you witnessed the biyah and you could testify and say that they did nisuin and they are fully married. That's
Yichud or
Ariel biyah. So that's one principle. And another principle applies in a lot of kashrut is about fear. Where the goy is gonna be afraid to do something that is not halachically acceptable. Okay? This applies in basar b'chalav and other aspects of kashrut. And the whole reason why going in and out of as a mashkiach or anything works is because the goy is concerned that you're going to catch him in the act, and that will prevent them from doing it. So we consider it that they do not, they're not mixing basar b'chalav, they're not putting non-kosher food, and they're also not mixing, perhaps, non-kosher milk into our kosher milk. So Rav Moshe's Svara goes as follows. He first says that if we look, and this applies only in America. It does not apply in Europe. It does not apply in Africa or wherever else. Because the rules and regulations of the government in Europe, in Africa, in Asia, wherever else you want to talk about, are not the same as the USDA regulations. And the USDA regulations say you're not allowed to have other things than cows. You have to have kosher milk. You cannot mix other stuff in it. So Rav Moshe says that once the government inspects, does weekly, monthly inspections to make sure that they're not mixing other stuff, the goy is going to be afraid to mix stuff in. And if he does mix stuff in, the government during the inspection, they'll give him penalties, and they continue to do this repeatedly, they'll close down their milking factory, and they're not allowed to do business anymore. So therefore, in order to avoid the fines or the closing of their business, they're afraid and they're not going to mix anything. And another thing is now that we have the government inspecting and putting the fear on them, you could say that I know that this company is not going to mix non-kosher milk into their products. And since I know for sure they're not going to do it, I'm going to tell you, as a Jew, I also witnessed them not mixing other milk. And then you have, quote-unquote, Chalav Yisrael, and you could have. So that's Rav Moshe Tshuva. He says you can rely on these two things, and only in places where it's hard to find Chalav Yisrael milk, or Chalav Yisrael milk is really expensive and hard to come by, then you can rely on these svarot in order to still have milk that falls within the gezerah. Now I know the Rav wants me to read that.
Yes. Yes. Here, take it's. I don't know. My phone doesn't turn, so take your phone.
I can read this
listen to you also. It's the translation is on the bottom.
So this is Rav Moshe's actual handwriting addressing the tshuva. It's a little hard to read the Hebrew.
Yeah, the translation on the bottom.
So the translation I'm going to read you says, regarding the milk of government, regulated dairies in our countries, meaning America, there are definitely grounds for permissibility to say that they are not included in Chazal's prohibition, and we see that many are lenient in this due to pressing circumstances in many places. However, in a place that Chalav Yisrael is obtained, even though it requires a bit more effort or is a bit more expensive, it is not proper to be lenient in this. One should purchase Chalav Yisrael. So he says, therefore, lechatchila, it is proper to purchase strictly Chalav Yisrael. Nevertheless, those that follow the lenient position and purchase Chalav Stam have a basis to rely on. Therefore, it is only b'diavad, and
But
especially
only in a place that you don't have. So if you're in Texas, but in New York, you have no excuse for that.
Texas they have as well.
In Texas they have as well. Okay.
I've
So if you want to have Chalav Israel, go move to Nebraska.
been to a few places already.
How about Georgia?
Houston has, Georgia had,
They have
they have Chalav Yisrael, Arizona.
They had
Arizona.
once
You see, also
in a while.
had, So a lot of these stuff, some of these cities outside of New York, maybe they don't get it every single day. Well, a lot of them do have it every day, but they have it every week in order for it to be
And of course,
considered.
Rav Ovadia, I have a tshuva of his son, Rav Ovadia is answering it completely. Completely. Rav Ovadia says it's asr. You have to have only Chalav Yisrael.
Yes. So now that we know that you only have a Chalav Yisrael, the question comes, does this apply to little children as well? Because we know, usually when it comes to little children, we're a lot more lenient. We say, the kid is sick, so therefore they need more stuff. So a lot of Rav Yaakov Yosef and also the Rav Mordechai bring down, when it comes to little children, one can be lenient.
But that's only in powder, only powdered milk. Afkat Chalav. Afkat Chalav. What they talked about, Rav Mordechai talks about, is Afkat Chalav. And the other place is also, Yakut Yosef is Afkat Chalav, which is,
Yes.
My
powder.
What
Huh?
difference does it make?
I'm sorry?
What difference does it make if it's powdered or not?
פנים חדשות בעולתם.
No.
What?
Why is it part of
It's chalab. We're putting chadashot.
It's because of the behavior of the non-kosher milk.
Yeah.
In terms of that, the process you won't be able to do it. That's basically it.
It's like when they say you can't make cheese out of non-kosher milk, kind of
We'll get
thing.
to that. So, what we have to also look at is that in the halachot of basar v'chalav, the Ramah brings down and says that even though little children can have stuff that are assumed d'Rabbanan or possibly even assumed d'oraita in case of the need, if a person does not need to do it and they can have other sources, they should avoid this because why? As the Rav was saying last night, I believe, because the Ramah brings down and says there's mitamtem haneshama, that it comes and blemishes the child's neshama for having something that is davar isur, even midarabanan. So while it is halachically permitted, there is still some blemish and damage that happens to the neshama, so a person should avoid giving it to children.
Come here.
What about goat milk?
Goat milk?
Goat milk is good if it's Chalav Yisrael.
Yeah.
They said gold milk.
Yes, I heard goat milk also. Yeah, goat milk. Any kosher animal.
Any milk that you need to consume, the milk has to be Chalav Yisrael.
Besides almond milk.
Let's go. Besides almond milk, yeah.
All right.
Or Zinchi milk.
Another thing we'll just
As parbles.
address slightly now, and we'll go more into detail later,
Yeah, it was like
is that we have the milk. Not only has it come from a kosher animal like a cow, a sheep, a goat, also the cow cannot be a treifa. That if you know the cow is a treifa, now anything that comes out from it is now forbidden. Yes. Well, that if you find it from a treifa, you're not allowed to have it because it says anything that comes out from a tameh is tameh.
I'm sending him pictures.
Yeah. So, we'll see how this plays a little further in. That's our whole thing about understanding where we know that you're allowed to have milk at all. Now the next step after milk is that you need to preserve milk. And one of the ways to preserve milk that they found was that you make cheese with it. And if you make cheese with it, now you can preserve this milk for weeks, months, years, even indefinitely. And the way, back in the time of Chazal and Gemara, the way they found how to make cheese is because they took an animal, it just nursed recently from its mother, and then they shechted it. And back then, they didn't waste any part of the animal. It didn't make a difference if it was the lungs, the heart, or whatever it is. It was food, so they ate it. And one of the parts they were going to eat, it was considered the keva. It's one of the stomachs of the cow. And in that part of the cow, after the calf has nursed from its mother, they found curdled milk. And now this curdled milk is what we consider, or we call today, cheese. And there's an enzyme that we call rennet that's found in the lining of the inner part of the stomach, and it has the ability to coagulate the proteins of the milk, and it makes curds. And you take those curds and you press them together, you empty out all the liquid, and now you have cheese in order to make different types. You can make Parmesan cheese, you can make mozzarella, and any other type of cheese you can make from this. And we'll see exactly how cheese today is made, but that's how they used to make it back then. So now, if it's found inside the stomach of a cow, maybe it's meat, or maybe it's basar b'chalav. So how can you have this cheese? And if the lining of the stomach was the only way to make cheese, or the main way to make cheese, how can you have cheese at all? It sounds like that all cheese should be asur, because why? Because what made it into cheese? Basar, meat. And we have a principle normally that we say, that davar shema made, whatever is the thing that makes your product into something else, that's what status applies to. So if you use a non-kosher thing to make something, even if your something is kosher, now it's not kosher because the davar shema made is non-kosher. So to here, the stomach is meat. Now it got mixed with dairy, with milk. And now you should have basar b'chalav at the very least to make it asur. So that is the opinion of Rashi. Rashi says, in the Gemara he says that anything you find inside the stomach, whether it's milk, curdled milk, is still chalav, and it has an issue of being mixed with meat, and therefore you're not allowed to use it. Now the doubt of Tosfot as well, who says that we differentiate between milk versus curdled milk. And he said if you find milk in it, does it look like milk? Does it taste like milk? Does it smell like milk? Yes. Therefore it is still chalav 100%. But when it comes to the curdled milk, it's changed. It's not milk, it's nothing. We consider it waste products from the animal. And as waste products from the animal, you could use it. It's not considered chalav, it's not considered meat. The same way you wouldn't call the feces of a cow meat, this is also considered like waste product discharge from the animal, and therefore you could use it. Now the dot of the Rif, and this is what Maran holds, he says that whether it is milk or whether it's curdled milk, both of them, they're found in the keva, the stomach of the animal. We consider it waste products of the animal, and it is no longer considered dairy, not considered chalav. And the data Tosfot is how the Ashkenazim go, and say that we differentiate between milk versus curdled milk. And this curdled milk, this milk and curdled milk, both of them have the enzymes from the stomach still present and strong enough in them in order to make...
You thought it was easy to talk, huh?
No, I didn't. Still have the ability that if you were to take either one of them and put it into gallons of milk, they have the ability to curdle it and to make new cheese from it. So one of the ways to make kosher cheese would be to use what's considered halachi, what they call the keva. That is either the milk or the curdled milk found inside the stomach. And according to Sfardim, since both of them are considered animal byproduct waste, you're allowed to take them and put them into new milk and make cheese of any type you want. Now according to Ashkenazim, since the liquid milk is still considered chalav, you're not allowed to use it, but you're allowed to use the curdled milk to make new ones. The other way is something a lot more common, especially back in the older days and in most of Europe, is you take the actual stomach and you take a small piece of the stomach, you cut it, and you dip it in to your milk. And it has strong enough enzymes that can curdle your vat of milk and to make cheese. So the question is, can we use this meat to make cheese? Because it is meat. The other stuff, when it comes to the curdled milk, or even the liquid milk according to Sfaradim, we consider it waste. It's not dairy, it's not meat. And therefore you can use them. But this, everyone would agree that the stomach is meat. So how can you use meat to be a davar shema'amid, the thing that is a catalyst to cause the cheese to curdle, if you're using meat? So when it comes to davar shema'amid, the principle goes that in order for it to make your kosher thing asur, it has to originally be asur itself. So if a person were to take a non-kosher treifa nevela cow stomach and put it in, originally the cow stomach that was nevela treifa is asur. When it comes in to the milk in order to make it cheese as a davar shema'amid, it's going to carry over its non-kosher status into the new milk. And this status of non-kosher, we say, is not even going to be batel in elef. It doesn't make a difference what ratio you have. It is never going to be batel. And there are a few reasons why we say it's not going to be batel. One is that we view that davar isur is still behind, it's still present. It is never left. It didn't get nullified, it didn't get mixed in, and we still see it there. And since we still see it, it is asur. And your whole thing now, as a mixture as a whole, is asur. That's the whole thing. So now, when it comes to kosher animals, what's the issue here? It's a kosher thing on its own, the stomach. Milk is kosher. So you can mix them together. But wait a minute, you'll ask, what about basar b'chalav? That's the whole chidush of basar b'chalav. I have meat kosher by itself. Chalav is kosher by itself. When does it become asur? When you put them together. What did I do here? I took stomach, meat, I had milk, I put them together. So you would think it should be asur. The reason why it's not an issue here is because the whole isur of basar b'chalav is benoten tan. Only if it gives off flavor from one to the other, and now there is a mixture of flavor of meat and dairy together, then you violate basar b'chalav. That's why Maran rules, and the Gemara brings down in the Mishnah as well. It says that if a person were to take a kosher stomach of a cow or any other kosher animal, mainly a cow, and put it into milk, find someone, a non-Jew, ask them to taste it. If it tastes like meat, then you can't have it. But if there is no flavor of meat, you're allowed to have it, because now there is no issue of basar b'chalav. And as a davar ma'amid, what was its status? Mutar. So it brings its mutar status also, and everything remains permitted. And this is something that's only done b'diavad. We don't really rely on this lechatchila to use fresh, cut, wet, moist, whatever Zalman's acronym when you use, of it being wet. Raw. Another way to circumvent this is, the Chazal say that a person should dry the stomach. So we say that anything that is dry, like it's dry like wood, it does not give off flavor, it has no taste of its own, and you can use it. So therefore, if a person were to dry fully 100% the stomach and use the powdered rennet to make new cheese, you're allowed to. But no issue here. The other problem would arise is that if you were to originally take this calf's stomach and leave the milk in it for 24 hours, me'et le'et, or you would salt it with the milk inside it. And this causes a problem, even though it's only midarabanan, because midarabanan we say that there are two other forms of cooking. One is that you take something and you put it into a liquid source and you pickle it for 24 hours, and that is a form of cooking. And another is that if you salt them, the salting has the ability to also cure it, and it's a form of cooking. Thank you. So now if a person were to do this, now you have a potential of having cooked meat and dairy together and imparting flavor to either the stomach or to the milk or curdled milk that's found inside the stomach. And now once you do that, you have an issue of basar b'chalav. So therefore you can't use what's inside the stomach, and you can't use the stomach itself as well. And this for Ashkenazim, since they said that the fresh milk is still considered milk, if a person were to do this, now that liquid milk has an issue of basar b'chalav and is asur to use. Now for Sfaradim, it's not a real issue here. Because once the milk is inside the kibbah, the stomach, it's considered waste. And can waste acquire tam of basar? We say no. We say that waste does not have an ability to acquire taste, and also does not have an ability to pass on taste. And since it does not have an ability to do either one of those, it sounds like you should be able to use it. But we rule that a person should not use this, and only b'diavad, if a person were to use these stuff, it's fine because there's really no issue. And the da'at of the Rambam is that you shouldn't do it at all. But according to the Rashba, the Riv, the Ran, and most other poskim, they say it's pirsha, it's waste, and therefore one could do it. And that is the opinion of Maran. But he says b'diavad, you should only do this. One person should not do this lechatchila. So I looked into this to see today what is the percentage of cheese that is made with animal rennet and what is used with other sources, whether it's an acid source, vinegar,
Kosher cheese or bichlal cheese?
kuklal. You know, vinegar, lemon, lime, citric acid, or one derived from plant-based. So according to the Wisconsin research of dairy, apparently they study dairy all day. According to them, they say that it is only about 5% of milk that uses
Cheese, man.
milk to make cheese. Yes, cheese that uses animal rennet. 95% use, other sources. And especially in Europe, since Europe has a tendency to say, whatever we used to do, that's our tradition. If you want to be considered, call yourself, I don't know, Parmesan, Reggiano, or whatever it is.
Feta cheese.
Feta cheese. Well, feta cheese is not on my list.
Yeah, that's in Greece. You can't call it feta cheese, you call it feta style.
Feta style. So in order to be considered government mandated to call your cheese a certain style, it has to follow the ancient methods which were to use animal rennet. And this applies to, here's a list of just few things. So we said Parmigiano Reggiano, Parmesan cheese is on it, Guerrera is on it, Pecorino Romano is on it, Camembert is on it, and now the ones that are made with vegetable base.
Camembert also?
Camembert, yes. The ones that's cheddar, feta is actually on my list. Mozzarella, Swiss, provolone, Monterey Jack, ricotta, cottage, cream cheese, All these,
The semi-soft.
the semi-soft ones, they do not need the strength of the animal rennet in order to make their cheese. So most of the time, most of the time, you know that they use like vegetable rennet. And stuff like paneer, cream cheese are also made from acid, lemon juice, citric acid. All those can make those cheese. Now, whenever the Wisconsin research of dairy looked into this, they said that what happened historically was that it used to be that calves were abundant. People wanted calves, so there was abundance of stomachs to use to make cheese. What happened, I think it brings down the 70s, it became very wishy-washy in order to be able to get a consistent supply of them. And therefore, people had to find an alternative to making cheese. And since it wasn't always consistent, what happens when there's one day yes, one day no? Prices also go up. And prices of animal rennet went up. So they found vegetable rennet was a good alternative, and it was cheaper. So they started adapting more vegetable rennet. And also today, since a lot of people are vegan, vegetarian, and there's a huge market for this stuff, they're obviously vegan, vegetarian. They also started implementing using more vegetable rennet. So in America, they say, according to their research, 95% of cheese is made with vegetable or acid-based methods, and 5%, especially the hard cheese that need to be aged and cured, are using animal rennet. Yes. Right. Right. So if you remember, the last thing we said about milk was that the milk has to come from a cow, sheep, goat that is not a treifa. So we need to first look and see what exactly is a treifa. We always say treifa, 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 but what exactly is a treifa? Gemara brings down and starts saying and says that if you have an animal that was attacked by like a lion, it's missing a limb, it has an extra limb, you find a needle in it, it has holes in its lungs, it has a hole in its brain, hole in its skull, all these make the animal treifa. And the Gemara discusses, and the Gemara is very, very unsure exactly what is a treifa. And the Gemara says that their opinion is say, how do you define what a treifa is? Ena yoledet, the calf, the cow, will not have the strength anymore to be able to bear a child, because it takes a lot from a woman or a female cow in order to birth and raise, a fetus in it. And whenever a person is sick, your body shuts down a lot of stuff and only focuses on the integral stuff to live. That's one thing they say. That's how you can determine it. Another thing it says, Treifa eno chayech shana. It was not going to live for 12 months. Other stories they bring down the Gemara and they say that what if I had an animal, it had one of the signs of being a treifa, but I came and I fixed it. I, did some scientific method, and now I'm watching this animal. It's been 12 months, 13 months, 14 months, 15 months, and it's still around. So you told me a treifa would not live for 12 months. Mine lived for 15. Maybe it's not a treifa anymore because now I fixed the issue. And the Gemara, as you read it, starts to sound like it says that if the animal, without some type of intervention, cannot live, therefore it's a treifa. And in our case, now we have to be careful, is our milk that comes to make cheese come from a treifa or not? And one of the most famous examples of a partial treifa is today happens to a lot of cows because of the feed they give them, is that the cows get very gassy. It's not a joke. Okay? They get very gassy, and it starts to expand their actual stomach, not just the area of the stomach and the udder. It actually expands one of their compartments and chambers of their stomach. And it gets to a point that it can really kill the animal.
That's what he's talking about.
Okay? And if left alone, chances are that the cow will not make it. You know, what happens similarly when an animal is pregnant or a woman is pregnant, when the fetus grows, it needs to take up space. And if you ever look inside the human body, there's no space. There's, the intestines, they're wrapped around in order to fit tightly. There's a spleen, there's this. There's no space for a baby. So what happens? It starts to push organs away. And similarly, once the stomach, the keva, starts to expand, it does the same thing. It puts pressure on organs. And as pressure builds up and builds on pressure on organs, either the stomach could burst, other things could burst, other things could happen, and it could make it a treifa that's not going to live. And this is a very common occurrence.
And why do they make it? Why do they feed the cows this?
So, it used to be, and if you look, I believe the Uruguay meat that comes here, it says grass-fed. They're left on the pasture, they eat grass, and that's what they're meant to eat. If you and I eat grass, our stomach does not have the ability to digest grass to break it down. So we get gas from it. And the same thing here. The feed that they give them a lot of corn, a lot of straw, wheat, and all this stuff is something they're not really meant to eat. And their body can't properly break down every part of it.
I've seen a cow that they actually made a hole to release the gas, and it's like a puncture in the tire. You hear like this hissing, very powerful thing. And there's different devices. What I showed you, that's what they do in Switzerland, which is ridiculous. But what they do is sometimes they just put this little valve inside, and when all the air goes out, and then but then there's a whole procedure. If that's something that it's common, does not make the animal treifa because there's a constant hole there. What happens is the stomach, because of this extreme pressure, the stomach of the cow dislodges itself and brings itself all the way up to the sides. Instead of being here, it goes all the way up there, and that becomes a problem because the animal will die.
I saw how the video. It's really nasty.
Yeah. So it's a practice today that they just feed the animals whatever is cheapest, whatever is in bulk, in order to fatten up the cows. Tell you just as a side note, I was in the Colorado Zoo or something, and I was talking to one of the people, and I asked them, "What do you guys feed your animals here?" And they said that we go to Walmart and we ask Walmart, "What do you guys have left over that you're going to throw out?" And we'll take it. So I asked them, "So what exactly do you get?" And they told me we get cheesecakes, cakes, cupcakes, everything that you could think of that you would never feed an animal, and they give them tons of it. Literally, they just pile it up, and that's what they feed the animals.
Oh my God.
So it's common practice today that whatever is the cheapest, whatever could bulk up the animals, that's what they give them. So it causes this major pressure buildup of gas. Now, as I was mentioning, and we'll get to that as our last thing, there's different methods of how to resolve this buildup of gas. Okay. So sometimes what they do is they just press up against the cow. It's going to help relieve some of the pressure. And it also will help them reposition the stomach back to its original location, and everything else would resolve itself and it'll clear up. Another method is that they do an actual surgery. Okay? They make an incision in the bottom of the cow or the top of the cow, and they go in from there. They release the pressure from the stomach, and then they stitch the stomach to the bottom of the cow in order to secure it in place. They anchor it in place for it not to move again, and not to cause the other issues of it moving around. And these two methods are not the most popular methods. Okay, surgery is never a first option. It's not cheap. It's not easy on the animal, especially when there is a non-surgical method that is easier, quicker, and will help the animal. And that is, as I was saying, is that they take like a hollow needle, they make like a small little cut in order to put like a cone-shaped thing. They put it in order to spread the incision. Then they put like a hollow needle through into the stomach. In the same way you would deflate, let's say, a basketball or something like this. It deflates it, all the air comes out, and now the stomach has no issue, and the cow is going to be fine. They leave this in for days, weeks, as long as it takes for all the gas to come out, all the gas buildup. Now, if you remember, we said, what is one of the things Gemara says that makes a treifa? If you find a needle inside it, and the needle makes a hole. And we always say, this is the famous question of kosher, Bet Yosef, is if there's a hole in the lung. So we see a hole inside an organ of an animal could make it a dinner treifa. So how can they do this? And then we're going to take the milk from it and also use it. This should be forbidden milk. And if they're going to take that milk and give it to us, comes a problem. Now if you look at dairy farms, they don't care. What does the dairy farmer care? If my cow does a surgery, can it produce milk today? Yes. Can I sell it? Yeah, why not? I'm going to make my money. So, Rav Belsky has a, 7-page tshuva on exactly what is the status of this cow. Is it a treifa? Is it not a treifa? If it is a treifa, can we still use it? And he ends up saying, and we'll see how, he says that it's not a treifa. Okay. And
How long do we have?
I don't know, whenever the Rav says.
No, because they need to daven, so.
Okay, we'll just finish with this. Right? So, he says that in order for it to be a treifa, the needle, the hole has to go from one side of the stomach through and through to the other. Now, in our method of stitching, it doesn't go through and through. Okay, and also, is that once the needle comes in, the hole is full. There's no hole. The threading goes through. Is there a hole? No, the needle is there. And as it goes in and in, there's never a moment that there's an actual hole, because there's either the needle or the thread to close it. So therefore it's not a treifa. And then when it comes to the needle, it doesn't go through and through. Also is that they did a study, this is what the Rebbe Omer also brings, or Ravalia brings, it says, most of these cows that have this procedure with the needle, they live. It helps them be healthier, and they'll live for years and years. Therefore, it's not a treifa. And Rav Belsky's final conclusion said that any animal that has an injury to it, if you could use medicine to heal it, therefore it's not a treifa. And what is considered a treifa is only something severe, like if a lion, wolf, or something like this came, scratched it, bit it, and now there is no real way to help it. And this animal is going to die. And there's no human science that could come and save it. Therefore, it's not a treifa. And all the milk is fine. And then just one last note is that if milk became non-kosher and it got mixed into other milk, midoraita we say that min b'mino batad barov, anything that is the same species mixed together, you can nullify it in majority. And the Chachamim came and said, we're going to require 60. And milk is not something darach chashuv, and therefore it could become nullified in the vat. And even if they were to have some minuscule amounts of non-kosher, meaning treifa, of milk, it could be nullified. But once they make cheese cheese is considered davar chashuv, and it's considered something rayul lechaber, it's something honorable to serve to guests, and something like that cannot be batal. Once there is cheese made with non-kosher milk, it's going to remain non-kosher. There's a lot more to say on this. We're going to start Arvit.
I just want to say something, just one second. Well, first of all, Ari, it's a great job, and it was a great honor move. It was it was a great honor to actually, I really enjoy learning with you, just because I need to leave. I really enjoy learning with you in the morning. However, for those of you bright lights who would think that kosher supervision and rabbinical issues is just a way to drive you crazy or to get money from you, I think that will be a good indication to you to see that it's just the opposite. Because Chachamim would consider so much anything that will be a blemish to the animal that you should say, please bring it on. So issues that in a regular milk will be a problem, would not be a problem, for Jewish consumption would be a problem. So therefore, you need to take this into account. So don't look for shortcuts. So instead of looking for shortcuts, I would tell you learn. And learn like you learn anything else with an open mind. Not to try to find some way out or some kind of like a loophole, but learn the topic, learn it well, and you'll see, I guarantee you, that the more you learn, the more you'll be willing to keep and understand and ultimately appreciate what Chachamim are doing for us. Again, Ari, Chazak Baruch, and I'll see you tomorrow.